Hello and welcome to this episode of the Small Axe Radical Short Film Awards podcast. On this episode, we're joined by Ernie Larsen and Sherry Millner. Together, Ernie and Sherry collaborate on film, video, photo text, book, curatorial and other research projects, all with a focus on radical leftist politics. Their collaborative effort, How Do Animals and Plants Live?, which looks at the anarchist-backed response to the so-called migrant crisis in Thessaloniki, Greece, will be screening at our festival. Ernie and Sherry, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy to be here.
Yeah.
Wonderful. It's good to have you. So I was hoping we could start the interview just by asking how your film came to be made and how you happened upon the squat at Orphanage Trofeo.
Sure. We were in Thessaloniki, as we have been many times for various, since 2009. And this was in 2016, we were invited to do a series of outdoor screenings at the No Border events, which took place at Aristotle University, which is on the campus in Thessaloniki. And we did these screenings at night. And
we showed films from all over, short films again from all over, but short radical films and experimental films. And there were migrants from all of the
hundreds of migrants
from both the camps and squats bussed in. And
this was shortly after the crisis. The Greece was sort of forced to, Syriza government, the leftist, so-called leftist Syriza government was forced to take up some of the EU's burden by closing the Balkan route, which led through this town of Idomeni. And one of what they did was to bus something like 15,000 migrants and put them in camps. I think 6 camps, maybe 5 camps all around Thessaloniki, which is one reason why the No Borders decided to make Thessaloniki their focus that year in the summer of 2016.
And we had been involved in that, and we knew about this particular squat. There were a number of squats which were trying to organize with both migrants and Greek people together, living together. There was a school, there was all, a medical facility. I mean, really, the support system here, solidarity in Thessaloniki continues to be kind of amazing in relationship to migrants and to crisis. So we knew about this squat and we thought we would go and film it.
So I was wondering, sort of in terms, I don't know how far you would obviously consider yourself anarchists, but anarchism features heavily within How Do Animals and Plants Live? And so I'm wondering how far this idea of bridging, of being sort of subversive, how far is that influenced, say, by an anarchist sort of sensibility, but also how far do they structure your work?
Well, we do consider ourselves anarchists and have always, I mean, since I'm 17. So it's something that
would be since the 60s.
Yes.
It's a shocking thing. It's a shocking to us still.
Yes. And it's nice in so many ways that there are so many more people who are now embracing anti-authoritarianism. Much more than in our lifetime, except for the 60s. It was very much, and it always is demonized in so many ways. So for us, that is a very hopeful sign now. But I would say that it is always that, and feminism, I would say, has always been the ways in which we think about structure, the idea of collage, the idea of things butting up against each other, the idea of contradiction, but also of play, which again, I think, and non-hierarchical structures. Mm-hmm. So not having a kind of authority we never look at or interview experts. Mm-hmm. We hardly ever, this is probably, there's very few films that we ever use interviews at all. This is one of the very few films we've made that we actually use an interview.
I mean, we've done mock interviews many times.
Yes.
But, not really, but in other projects, yeah. But I think there's a correlation, very definite correlation between this idea, and that's part of one of the exciting things to us about making this particular video is that this hunt for new structures and new ideas and new forms of life, and how those things somehow become a constellation. All right, so that we can somehow articulate what other aspects of these new forms of life, in which to us the tragedy, of course, is that was repressed in the case of orphanotrophia. And so for us was, how can we recreate that? How can we make that come alive? And as Sherry says several times, as a more playful way.
So it really, so those, so we constantly are trying to bring in other elements or find ways to play with other things like the moon. Obviously we looked for cues from what was in the book. And again, the idea of translation. I mean, the two people who are doing simultaneous translation, of course, in the film, they kept saying they hated the way they sounded because we didn't let them see the text beforehand.
Yeah,
so they had to translate
right then
and there. So I said, "Oh, we could do the English so much better.
Let us do it again." We said, "No, you're missing." No,
but that's not the point. Obviously, it is about the struggle to translate and the generosity also around that. The insistence on communicating across, whether it's language, in terms of creating something better and creating something different together. In a kind of equal way. And so that idea of translation and what translation, how much we have to try to translate our experiences and create something else out of them, was really central for us.
So this idea of translation is actually, we can go back to it, really, really intriguing to me. It's sort of I suppose in a very sort of conservative sense, translation is something that sort of, potentially holds with it a certain level of fear for sort of centrist and right wing states, because there's this sort of bridging of gaps, even if idiosyncratic ideas are lost within one language to another. You're bridging a gap that creates a community, and so this idea of translation as being the basis of a commons, sort of, could you sort of speak on that a bit more, sort of elucidate what you're trying to sort of get towards?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think it's we were struggling to figure that out ourselves. That we felt like that was a basis that in fact, even if two people speak the same language, or a group of people, or if we are in an assembly, for example, which we could be in quite often here and other places, or in over the years in many different situations, people speaking the same language, they actually are translating. In a sense, that's an acts of translation, even if it's the same language, because you have to understand it, what they're saying, and then also, as Sherry's point about generosity is that part of this is like, where's the commonality in this?
And how do you create a context?
How do you expand that? How do you, without being, and still maintain your criticality, for example? And for example, and I think this the section with in the video where our friend has his chances to translate something, right, from Greek to speak in Greek, and is trying to understand it, trying to
find the right
words. That was like, again, that was like one take, and it was like, okay, how can we do this? How, and I wasn't expecting to interrupt him when he was saying it, but I did, and that
opened up a space.
Opened it up for I think for us. Oh yeah, okay, this is something that we can show on, almost in a present tense mode, how that is created. There's a commonality that exists between the two of us in trying to sort out what this means. Right?
So in a way, I think we were always very cautious about, again, speaking for anyone else, even though we were using the personal to, going from sort of, the macro to, to talk about issues in the world, always not leaving it at that level. But at a certain point, I mean, again, I think it was very much when we started coming to Greece. We made a tape before this one as well, around, again, anarchism in both Greece and Barcelona. I mean, a kind of history as well as what was happening here in terms of police and things like that. When we started coming here, I think that we realized, I mean, I think that we were very leery about going to other countries for a long time. I mean, you know, we're not exactly young, partially because we don't speak languages. And we felt very conscious that that was, you know, again, a very American thing, and a problem.
So we've come to the end of my questions now, actually. It's been wonderful speaking to you. And these ideas are actually, I feel quite enthused, quite exhilarated after these ideas. So thank you very much for sharing them. But to wrap up, could you, oh, sorry.
Very pleased that pleased you asked us to do this.
Oh, wonderful.
Doesn't always happen. Doesn't always happen. I'm sure you know that. So it's good.
Could you just sort of do you have any future projects you'd like to work on? I know you sort of told me something before.
Yes, there's one we're actually going to work on next month. Again, it's sort of in the middle. We're not sure what middle.
And again, it wasn't something that we thought we would start, which seems to be, I mean, earlier in our work, we had plans and kind of sort of scripts and, you know, knew what we were doing before we were doing it. And now we seem to happen upon things.
Yes. This project is rooted in Apulia in southern Italy, and we've been there many times before also, and for a longer period of time.
Since, around
since the 90s.
90s, yeah.
And and then we weren't there for a number of years, and then we came back, and it would change enormously. And one of the changes, which is very interesting and in some ways gratifying, is that there were these local initiatives which were anti-authoritarian based, and there were agriculture. One of them in particular was an agricultural collective, which was based in Apulia and in several areas. And it was made up, this collective was made up of both migrants, African migrants, and local radicals who had been away for a number of years, like as many people do, is like,
well, in places like Apulia and many
no jobs
places, people, you know, young people would, as soon as they got out of school or whatever, would leave, either to go to college or to go to other cities and get work. I mean, no, you know, so when we first went to Apulia, there were no young people living there.
It really seemed like it.
Really.
I'm sure there were, but it didn't seem like
people, you know, it's the kind of place that people, and again, in the changes in terms of economics and globally, and Apulia is not the only place that's happened to. I mean, we even see it, of course, here in Greece, people living with their parents, moving back home, because there aren't jobs. And
the other aspect of this particular project is that they're landless. They rent their land that they use to farm. And in researching the area, we came upon the deeper history of this, which is pre-fascist history of the role of the landless peasantry in Apulia, and how it had an anarcho-syndicalist base from about 1890 through 1922. And even
amazing.
And it's very interesting. It's very militant. And
we had no idea.
We had no idea.
And people there have no idea.
Many people don't. And tell people about it there, they're just shocked in many cases. Although a few of the radicals,
the young people know.
They know. But so
Apulia is a place that we love, that we've gone many times, and have come to know many people in the area. But this it's very kind of, again, amazing for us to see these migrants again, and these pretty poor anarchists trying to create something that is viable and that feeds them, as well as, I mean, they have a social center in Nardo. I mean, they're again, it's not just this
there's quite
farming, but again, it's an initiative around around language, around making a world in a way. And so and
in fact, the collective started out of language school, that there was teaching migrants Italian, and they started figuring out what they wanted to do next, and that's where it came from. And I think that's the other aspect of it too. Actually, that's interesting.
So best for the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Carl.